What I want to do is go ahead and get started with the information on what we're going to talk about today in the new features. And let me, hopefully this won't go too quickly. So one of the new features is that they've added spell check to Sage100. It is one of the new global features in the system, and I'll actually show you how that works, and we'll talk about the various locations where spell check has been added to the functionality. So that's something that a lot of folks are very happy with, is that they've added spell check. They've also updated the desktop, where they have added some additional icons to the toolbar. You can also, there's icons where you can launch CRM, Sage Payment Solutions. If you take credit card processing, you can launch the Business Insights dashboard. So there's several new navigation buttons that are now added to your desktop. Version 2018 also comes with Crystal Reports version 2016. So as most of you are aware, when you do update your Sage software, there's typically a newer version of Crystal Reports that is also installed at that time. So one thing that I do want to point out for anyone that's listening today, if you also use Sage Fixed Assets, this version of Crystal, Sage Fixed Assets also uses the same version of Crystal. And if you haven't upgraded your Sage100 at the same time you upgrade your Sage FAS, you're going to have a conflict with Crystal. So my advice to you short term is, if you do have FAS software, do not upgrade it to 2018 version yet on your own. Give us a call and we'll provide some advice to you before you actually make that jump. Otherwise, it will break the Crystal Reports in your current version of Sage100, and we don't want that to happen. Some of the other things that with Crystal Reports that they've added is new functionality where you can do conditional formatting of boxes and lines. You can do vertical text alignment. It has direct data access for SQL Server 2014, so they've added that functionality. And also, when we upgrade your software, it does require us to uninstall all other versions of Crystal before we can install the version 2016. And again, I have the disclaimer on there talking about the fixed assets, is that our recommendation is do not upgrade it on your own, because it will break the Crystal Reports within your Sage100. Okay. What's going to be rolled out in phases, I guess, with Sage100, but starting with the payroll tax calculation engine, is that there will be automatic service notifications that pop up when you go into Sage. So the payroll tax calculation engine is something that's brand new. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the presentation when we get into more detail about the changes in payroll. But I do want to advise you that with the service notifications, or what was previously known as Sage Advisor, anything that pops up on your screen that says now you can do you want to download a new version? Do you want to download a product update or a service update or patches or fixes? We always advise our clients, do not automatically install anything. Please check with us first. And the reason for that is, especially if you have any customizations, any custom programming, third-party add-ons, they may not be compatible with a brand new version, and so you may overwrite those customizations, and then your system could possibly be down. So it's always good before you just automatically install anything related to your Sage or Sage products is that you just check with us first, and so that we can advise you. In the Accounts Payable module, the only thing that's been changed is that the 1099 e-filing and reporting has been renamed, and it is now called Form 1099 Tax Reporting. In Accounts Receivable, the only changes in AR are those things that are related to payroll, which is related to the commission edit register. And they've added additional fields of period starting date and check date. On Business Insights, on the dashboard, the Workforce Statistics option has been removed to protect sensitive employee information. We'll talk a little bit later when we get into payroll, but they have made changes so that you can set up in security now based on role maintenance who can see sensitive employee information. So for instance, right now, anyone that has access to employee maintenance can see the Social Security number field. They have enhanced the security so that several fields are now masked, and you can only see the entire field if you have permissions within the role maintenance. They've made a couple of changes in inventory management. The main one being is that statuses have now been added to the warehouse code maintenance. So you can now set a warehouse code to inactive or restricted, and then also there's the active status. The barcode module, for any of you that use barcoding, they basically have renamed that to Mobility for Barcode. So once you upgrade and you're looking at your module listing on your screen, instead of it saying barcode, it will now read Mobility for Barcode. Related to the Visual Integrator module, you now have control on whether users can create and run import and export jobs based on a module by module basis. So before, if you had access to do things in Visual Integrator, you either had access or you didn't. Now you could say, you could restrict so that maybe someone in Accounts Payable needs to import in AP invoices, but you do not want them to have access to be able to export data from payroll. So options were added to the role maintenance to accomplish that. So that's another new feature. So they've added several things to add more controls on the role maintenance. So that's one thing when you upgrade to version 2018 that your project manager will be discussing with you, because you may want to go ahead and enforce some of those security changes at the time of the upgrade. Okay. The Job Cost module has been basically re-architected, or the programming, the back end of the programming has changed. For those of you that have been on Sage for several years, you know that going back with version 4.0, they have started updating the back end of the software for various modules over the past few years. It started in version 4.0 with the general ledger, and then as it progressed, there were changes in accounts payable, accounts receivable, and so forth. Two of the main modules that had not changed is the Job Cost module and the Payroll module. Both of those have been brought into the new in version 2018. So with that, and again, we're going to talk more in detail about the payroll in just a little bit, but one of the things that you need to remember, if you do have the job cost module, when you upgrade to this latest version, there will be more involved with this particular upgrade, but then when you upgrade the next time, you're not going to have to go through the same process. So if you have the job cost module, there are certain things that will not convert and will have to be recreated. That will be addressed and identified during the pre-upgrade analysis process so that we can provide you with the detailed scope of work. But if you have any custom Crystal reports that are job cost related, you will have to have those redone. If you have any visual integrator imports or exports, those will have to be recreated. And any forms that you have in job costs, like your billing form, will also have to be recreated. And then also in job cost, in the options, there's now a history tab, so you can choose if you want to retain job cost history, and if so, for how many years. Okay. And then we're going to get into talking about time clock and payroll a little bit more before we actually get into Sage. So I'm going to ask Jody right now if there are any questions that have come in based on anything that I've covered so far before we get into the demo phase.
We don't have any questions yet.
Okay, thank you, Jody.
You're welcome.
Okay. So one thing that also, for any of you out there that are users of the payroll module, if you also have the Sage100 time clock module, actually I believe it's time card module, I think I mistyped there. It is not yet compatible with the new payroll version. So if you do have the time card module, you cannot upgrade just yet. Again, that will be identified during the pre-upgrade analysis. If you by any chance have questions after this webinar, you know, can you upgrade, can you not upgrade, what are your options, please let me know. And then also you can see that obviously I should have had spell check in my PowerPoint presentation, but there's been a complete redesign of the payroll module as well. So we're going to get into the changes of payroll during the presentation, but what you do want to consider is that, again, any forms that you have related to payroll, so your payroll checks, your direct deposit stubs will have to be created, and that will be per company. Any visual integrator imports or exports will have to be recreated. All your custom Crystal reports related to payroll will have to be created. And you also, we're going to talk to you when we do the analysis, if you're wanting to convert the historical companies. There will be pre-migration utilities that we have to run. There are several things that may have to be possibly re-entered related to payroll. We'll talk about that again a little bit later. But what we find is that most clients are choosing not to convert those historical companies because it is adding a significant amount of time per company to convert those with this upgrade, but it's certainly ultimately your decision whether or not you want to keep those. And the biggest thing is that they have changed how the payroll taxes are calculated and actually have a tax calculation engine that is built in. So if you do payroll, the workstations that do payroll must have internet access in order to be able to do the payroll tax calculation. So that's another thing that is a requirement now for payroll. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go in and take a look at Sage, and I'm going to go in and cover some of the things that we discussed during those bullet points. And this is a look at Sage100 version 2018. So what I'm going to do first is I want to talk to you and show you the spell checking feature. So an example is one of the places where they've added the spell check functionality is in the memo feature throughout Sage. So I'm going to use accounts receivable and customer maintenance as my example today. And I'm going to pull up a customer, and I'm going to go into my memos. And I created one yesterday just called Spell so I could show you an example. So as you are creating or adding notes to a memo, anything that it recognizes as a misspelled word, it is going to underline for you. So if I read this and I'm taking a look at it, if I right-click on that, it actually brings up a list of options. I can tell it to ignore it. If it's a word that I use frequently that's not in the dictionary, I can actually add it to the dictionary. Now, when it adds it to the dictionary, it's adding it to my user dictionary, so it's not a global addition, so it's not on everyone's screen. But they've added the spell checking to the memos in Sage. They've added it to the messages that print on forms, such as like your invoices, statements, your checks. They've added it to the Paperless Office electronic delivery windows. They've added it to the comments. So if you're typing in comments in Sage, it's added it there. It's added it to the notes in the customer contact maintenance and the vendor contact maintenance. This is related to e-business manager, but the email notification maintenance that's in e-business manager, it's added there. The test email and test fax subject lines that are in your company maintenance, it's added it there. Your broadcast message from the master console. So if you're using the master console and you're wanting to send a message out and broadcast a message, that should pop up on my screen in just a minute. So if I want to broadcast a message, this also has spell check. So, and then finally, for those of you that do any work in custom office, if you're adding a multi-line UDF or user-defined field to a screen, you can select on that UDF whether or not you want to enable spell check. So if you have employees, you created a UDF and you have people that are doing free-form typing in that field, you can decide whether or not you want to enable spell check. So this is a feature that users have been asking for a long time. So we're very excited that that feature has been added. Jody, any questions about the spell check?
No questions so far.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I'm sorry, I sat here for so long, my light just went out on me. Now I can't read my notes, so pardon me. We have automatic lights in our office. We talked about the change in vendor maintenance to the setup and the warehouse code maintenance. So in warehouse code maintenance, if I pull up a warehouse, you'll see down here I have warehouse status. And now I also have active, inactive, and restricted. So inactive would be intended if your warehouse is no longer in use. And if your warehouse is inactive, you cannot select that warehouse in any of your data entry tasks. If it is restricted, then it can still be used for activity, but it would be temporarily suspended, for example, like to take a physical inventory and so forth. So again, this is a new functionality within the inventory management. And we're going to talk a little bit about, we talked earlier about some of the things that had been added to the menu and some of the additional buttons so that you have those up there. You also have with your information center where you can go out and look, gather more information about some of the additional services that Sage offers. You also can get a connection directly to Sage City. You can take a look at what's new. Now, when you do an upgrade, our project managers go through and show you the new features and functionality, especially if it's modules that you use on a daily basis, but you do have that information as well. In job cost, one of the things that they have added is the ability to use batch entry. So batch entry can now be used for job posting entries, job billing entries, and field report entries. So that's another great feature that they have added. They've enhanced the maintenance screens. And I need to go to a different company to show you. Bear with me. So they've enhanced some of the features on the job maintenance screen. They also, again, in the setup and in the job cost options, they have added the ability where you can select to do the batch entry. And again, we talked about the 3 areas where you can do batch entry. It's not an all or none. You can choose which of these entries that you want to do batch processing in if you choose to. So we are going to be providing more in-depth information specifically related to job cost and the changes within job cost. Because such a small portion of our clients actually use this module, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it today. We do have more clients that do use the payroll module, so we will spend some more time going through those details today. Okay, we talked about, let me go back to my ABC company. We talked about the Barcode Module, which I do not have installed in my particular version, but again, it has been renamed to Mobility for Barcode, so that's what you're going to see on the screen. And then they've also, with the Barcode, they've added some what they call easy initials, easy import tasks. And they've added 4 tasks that can be added to import data collected on mobile devices. So they've the inventory easy import is for physical count entry, card count entry, receipts, issues, adjustments, alias entry, and job issues. And that task replaces the import inventory transactions that was previously there. In sales order, the easy import for invoice data entry and shipping data entry, and that replaces the import sales orders transactions. On the PO side, they've added an import for your receipt of goods, and that task replaces the old import PO transactions. And they've also added it for bill of material so that you can import your production entry. And that replaces the old import bill of materials transaction. So they've kind of enhanced those tasks, and they've also on the mobility piece, they also have a remote setup for the ScanCo mobile app if you're using ScanCo and using a mobile app. So they've added some of the functionalities to the options as well. For any of you that are interested in learning more about barcoding or ScanCo, if you want to just reach out to me or to Jody, if you reach out to me, I'll put you in touch with Jody, but we can provide you with any additional information that you're interested in. There's also an easy import inquiry that they've added. They also have an import reject maintenance, so that if something is rejected, you have a maintenance screen for that, and also reporting. So that is part of the mobility for barcode, the changes that they have made. They've they've made a couple of changes to the paperless office module, and those are really were made because of the redesign of the payroll module. So you can now have the ability to create and email employee payroll checks in a PDF format. So you do have the option to do that. The employee viewer task has been added to the menu so that you can see checks or direct deposit stubs. And in the employee self-service, the View Documents button has been replaced with the View Stubs button. So they've just added a couple little things there that's all related to paperless office. We talked about, and I do not have the time card module installed as well because, as I mentioned earlier, it is not compatible with the 2018 version. So they are working on the compatibility for that. We have been told that it should be sometime probably mid-2018 when it's available. So if you do have the time card module and payroll and are interested in an upgrade, if you will let me know, and we will, I'll keep you on a list, and as soon as that time card module is compatible, I will get in touch and then we can start the process. So they've also made a change with Visual Integrator that is related to the security, which I mentioned earlier, so that now you can say, based on the role maintenance, what modules that they have access to. So if you go into your role maintenance and you look, there's a couple of different places. You have under tasks, you have Visual Integrator, and you have imports and exports and so forth. Then if you go to the security events and look at Visual Integrator, you have whether or not you allow supervisor rights, and then you can drill down into a module by module basis based on that. The other thing that I wanted to show you is I had mentioned to you that in payroll, they were now masking the sensitive information. So for my role in Sage, under payroll, under security events, if I click on payroll, you will see where it is unchecked to allow viewing, printing, or editing of highly sensitive personally identifiable information. That's a mouthful. But what happens, and we'll see this when we go into employee maintenance, is that it's going to mask all but the last 4 digits of that employee's social. So if this is checked, you're going to be able to see the full social. If it's not checked, then you are not able to see that. Okay. Do we have any questions, Jody?
No questions.
Okay. And in the role maintenance, the modules that where you can actually manage who can have access or do imports and exports, the modules that it's affected is the accounts payable, the receivables, the barcode that we just talked about, bill of materials, bank rec, common information. If you're using the CRM product, you can limit access to be able to import or export information related to CRM. Fixed assets, general ledger, inventory, purchase order, payroll, RMA, and sales order. So it affects most all of the modules. All right. If we don't have any questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the payroll changes. For those of you that don't have payroll, if you'll bear with me while I go through this, because once we get finished, we're going to talk a little bit more about the versions of Sage that are supported, what version is going to be retiring this year, how to request an upgrade, and how to gather to get more information. And then also, I'm going to talk about what information we're going to make available to you after the session today. So the first thing that I wanted to let everyone know is if anyone is on the call that has Sage100 Premium, which is the SQL version, one of the limitations of that premium version is that it did not come with the payroll module. So with these changes, you can now add the payroll module to Sage100 Premium. So if you are interested in adding the payroll module, please reach out to Jody, and she will be glad to get information to you. So what we're going to talk about today with payroll is we're going to start with the setup options in payroll and show you some of the changes that they've made in here. So we're going to look at tab 2, and a couple of the things that they've added in tab 2 is one of them is they've added this default tax profile. Your tax table maintenance is completely changed. They're now using an online tax calculation engine that manages your payroll taxes. And so you can set a default profile if all of your employees for a particular company fall under that, or if not, you can just leave that blank. And Jody, it looks like we might be getting a question or a chat. If you see that, please.
Yes, we just had 2 questions come in. First one is, will there be a demo of job costing changes?
Yes, we will. If they can, if you'll gather their name, Jody.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, as I mentioned, we will go in more in depth on a separate session related to the changes in job cost.
Okay, will do. The second question I will answer offline. It has to do with, does version 2018 use SQL? And instead of taking that offline, the answer is yes, it does. Sage 2018 still has 3 different platforms: standard, advanced, and premium. Premium is the SQL platform. So if you are currently on standard or advanced and wish to evaluate moving to the SQL premium platform, you can contact me.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions.
Okay, thanks. And then the other field that has been added here is the allow multiple tax profiles and data entry. And again, with the new tax calculation, you're setting up tax profiles, and which would include your federal, your state, and your local. Basically, what you're doing now is just you're having to set it up in a different, I don't want to say system, but the setups are different now, and you assign those to your employees. So they have added that. Before they had benefit schedules, and now they've renamed the benefits as time off. So they've added a time off button. You still have 3 time off categories. In the prior versions, you could only change the description of this 3rd category, but in 2018, you can actually change the description of any of these categories. The other thing that you can do is you can reset time off hours, and they've added anniversary date to that option. On the 4th tab, and this is something that is really exciting, is they've added batch entry to payroll data entry. And what that allows you to do is that you can be entering multiple payrolls at the same time in different batches. So each batch can have its own pay cycle, its own starting and ending date, and so forth. So you can have those multiple batches going at any time. The only time that you can have, when you can only have, so multiple people could be entering in payroll data entry. The only time that you can't have multiple batches open at once is when you are doing the payroll tax calculation, printing your checks, or updating your check register. Other than that, the batch entry works the same as it does at any other module within Sage. The other thing that you cannot do with batch entry, actually, is you can't merge batches and you can't transfer an entry from one batch to another. So that is another limitation, and it was basically set up that way on purpose with payroll data entry. Also, you had the ability to, there was a checkbox in the setup to be able to see the payroll data entry report in detail versus in summary. They removed that checkbox, and now when you go in to print the payroll data entry audit report, you have it on that printing screen whether you want to print it in detail or in summary. And then they've the option to reactivate terminated or inactive employees that you could do in payroll data entry has been removed, and it's now a separate security event that requires permissions. So that is something else that they've changed. Then we're going to take a look at the history tab, and this is the one that everybody is really, really excited about, in addition to the way that we're doing the taxes now. Data is now stored for your payroll by year and by month. So because of how Sage is now storing the data in 2018, it eliminates the need to close your year or close the quarter before you can move to the next payroll. So, you know, that's the main reason why most everyone creates that historical company at the end of the year, is so that they have the data to run their W-2s out of the historical company so they can close their live company and do data entry, you know, for the upcoming year. This new feature is going to eliminate the need to do that. Obviously, if you want to continue doing that, you certainly can, but it is now not going to be a requirement. And what they've done is they've added the years to retain payroll history, and you can retain from 4, and I believe it goes up to 99 years, and 4 is the minimum. So it's, once you get on 2018, you're always going to have, you know, once we get 4 years into that version, you're going to have 4 years of payroll history. So that is something that is really, really exciting in this new version. Just briefly, a couple of things in earnings code maintenance. They've increased the field for the earnings code, so it now can be up to 6 characters. and the description field is now 30 characters long. So they've enhanced that. You'll see where you can apply a tax rule to earnings codes. And this field right here. Apply to box 14 on W-2. This has been where you can add the included in the year-to-date options for applying box 14 for a particular earnings code on the W-2 form. Again, the tax rule has been added. So if you remember kind of the old screen, you had what it was for federal, state, local. This is now going to take your tax rule, which would be a combination of any of those, and apply it. The same basic principle has been brought into the deduction code maintenance, where you now have 6 characters for the deduction code and up to 30 characters for the description. You can also say whether or not the deduction code is to be applied to a W-2 box, and you can choose whether it's box 12 or box 14. And if it's box 12, then you would say which code is applicable if it does go to box 12. So they've added that. They've also added the tax rule down here. And that tax rule determines, you know, what the rule or what the options are for pension plans and cafeteria plans. All right, and the benefits that were in there before, it's now called time off maintenance. We looked at that in the setup. So whatever you called the 3 categories in your options, that's going to flow through to here. So you still have the ability to set up those schedules, so basically the benefit schedules for your employees. And they've also expanded, I do believe, the decimal places on the accrual rate as well. In payroll data entry, they've added memo manager maintenance. So if you need to put a note or anything when you're doing payroll data entry, on an entry you have that feature. And again, there's a lot that we could go through, but with our limited time today, I'm kind of just showing you some of the highlights of the main changes that have happened in this particular module. For the yes,
we do have a question regarding payroll. Will the payroll departments still be limited to 2 digits?
That is a good question. And I believe the answer to that is that it has been expanded. I will look for that.
We will confirm that to you and respond offline to anybody that asked that question. So if you're interested in the answer to that question, please also put that into the questions box, and we'll respond to you separately.
Okay, I can't answer that.
Oh, you can? Okay.
I can't answer that. Yeah, like I said, there's been so many changes that trying to remember all of them. But yes, the department number field has been expanded to 6 characters.
Thank you.
So because of the limitation that was there previously, a lot of people used special characters so that they could have more departments. The special characters are no longer allowed. So when we do an upgrade, there are several pre-migration utilities that we have to run, things that we have to look at before migrating the data. And one of those conversion wizards is going to look for those special characters. So that's something that would have to be fixed while we're doing the upgrade. But then, yes, you can go up to 6 characters. Anything else before I
No other questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. We're not going to get into a lot because it could get really in-depth, but talking about how the taxes are now calculated. When, I mentioned to you they have now a tax calculation engine that is basically anytime that there's a tax change on the federal or state level, and if a state requires local reporting, I believe in most instances, if it's a requirement, it is listed. They also keep updated with the local taxes. If filing those is not a requirement, then there still may be some manual setup like you're used to doing. Like now for Kentucky, all of your local taxes are something that you have to set up manually. The other thing that, as I understand it, you can now have multiple local taxes when you're building those tax profiles. So several of our clients have multiple local taxes, and they've always had to purchase an add-on from DSD to manage that. And it is my understanding that once you move to 2018, that will no longer be required that you have that add-on, and that Sage will now take care of that for you. So with the taxes, you're now going to have a tax profile management, which I'm going to just grab one that is preset for me. And you can basically, it has different check boxes. So when you're setting up a tax profile, you're saying whether it's for the location of their work, the location of their residence, if it's both. And you're checking what taxes apply, and you'll have federal and you have state. And then for those that have local requirements, those local taxes are also listed there too. So it's a little bit easier for you to go in and just check what those taxes are. The thing that is great about this is when there is a tax update, in your setup now, you're going to have you're going to set up an email for who the service notification goes to. They're going to get a notification that there is an update to that tax profile, and you're basically going to, with a click of a button, this is your group setup, and I may take you into the wrong spot, and I apologize if I do. Basically, with a click of a button, you say that you want to update your tax tables. It goes out, it gets the information, it brings it back in and populates it. And it's a very quick process. So that also, with all the changes that they've made, you now can implement tax table changes right away. You don't have to wait until you've printed your W-2s in order to load your tax tables. Now this year was kind of an anomaly because they made changes to the tax, they made the tax cuts late, and we've had to do the tax tables much later than normal. But the way this is set up now, because it's tracking your history, you can close your year, or actually you don't even have to close your year. You don't have to create historical companies. You don't have to wait to load your tax tables. They can be updated immediately. When there's an update available, you'll get a notification. And like I said, you're literally clicking a button in order to get that. Now, I mentioned earlier that you do have to have an internet connection. To the best of my knowledge, and we'll do more testing with this, I don't think there's any way around that. So I don't believe that there is a way to manually manage a tax table maintenance or the rates in version 2018. It all has to be done through this engine that has been built into the system. So for anyone that's an issue for, then get in touch with us and we'll look to see if there are any options, but you do want to keep that in mind. And Jody, do we have another question?
No other questions at this time.
Okay. So that's kind of I know we ran through this really quickly, but that's kind of a high-level overview of the changes that have been made to the 2018 version. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint real quick and just briefly talk about what version of Sage, what versions are supported and what versions are going to be retiring. So the version 5.2, which is also the 2015 version, will officially retire. Sage will be retiring it September 30th of this year. So what that means is, especially if you're not on the 2018 version, is that they will not be putting out tax table updates. They will not be issuing any product fixes, hot fixes, or anything like that for the product. You'll still have access to the knowledge base. Oasis will continue to support you. Where we would run into an issue is if you had a problem where there was a fix, if there was a bug that was fixed, Sage is not going to make that fix available in a retired version. And if it was an issue where we needed to call them to get additional assistance, if you're on an unsupported version, they're not going to help us. So this is lining out when versions are retired. If you're on a version prior to 5.2, then your version is already retired. And I know I worked with a lot of year-end people this year that are still on 5.1, so you certainly do need to think about getting an upgrade. If you want to know how to check to see what version you're on, I'm going to go back to my Sage. And when you open your Sage, if you go and click Help, and then About Sage100, it's going to tell you what version you're on. So the 28 version is also known as 6.0. If you open this and it says Mass 90, you can guarantee that you're on an unsupported version because that name change took place a few years ago. So that's where you're going to check that. So again, we're going to provide you with how to request an upgrade, how to follow up. If anybody wants a copy of this, just let me know. And then we will be making this presentation available on our website so that you can go out and take a look at it at any time. We're also going to be adding additional short YouTube videos that go into a little more detail than what I did today. They are still short, but they will talk about the changes in payroll, and we'll be looking to add some for job cost as well. So if you want to request an upgrade, if you will email me, pam@oasisky.com, and put upgrade 2018 in the subject line, then I will in turn send you an upgrade request form so that we can get a pre-upgrade analysis scheduled. And then I will also send you a current supported platform matrix that you can share with your IT folks to confirm that your server, operating system, workstations are compatible with the 2018 version. If you're on 5.2 or lower, please do not delay. What we had this past year is we had an influx in October and November that were wanting to upgrade prior to the end of the year, and it's just impossible to fit that many upgrades into a short amount of time. The other thing you need to keep in mind is if you have custom modifications or third-party products, that also enhances the lead time for an upgrade. So if you are knowing now that you want to upgrade in August because that's your slow month, what I would suggest that you do is go ahead and make the request now. We can get the pre-upgrade analysis completed, get you the scope of work and estimate, get it approved, someone assigned, and they'll know that you want to upgrade in August. And then there won't be any issues with any lead time. And we just talked about that. You know, if you do have third-party products or custom programming, your lead time could be 8 to 12 weeks, so you do need to, again, plan accordingly. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I will ask Jody if there's any additional questions right now.
We do have a couple more questions coming in. If we can take a few minutes to answer these. I'm pretty sure we know the answer to this first one. Did Sage expand the bank code field in 2018?
They did not. The bank code field is still where you can have up to 36 different bank codes, which is 0 through 9 and A through Z. So they did not expand that field. If someone
However, there is an enhancement, and this is Jody again, and this is something that you would talk to me about. There is an enhancement for Sage100 that does expand the bank code field to 3 characters, which gives you a whole lot more options. So if you are interested in that enhancement, please contact Jody at oasisky.com. Pam, the next question is, are there any options for online access to direct deposit stubs in the 2018 version?
And I'm going to assume, and they can fill in or answer this, that they're asking if there's online access for the employees to be able to get those stubs, kind of like an employee self-service type thing.
Right. Yes, that
okay.
is the question.
To the best of my knowledge, there is not. But Jody, if you will please keep that question and who asked that question, I will be glad to do a little additional research, and then we can confirm that whether you can or you cannot.
Okay, we'll follow up on that one separately. Anybody else interested in the answer to that question, please also type that into the questions window so that we know to contact you directly as well. I think that might be all of the questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody. Yep, that is all of the questions.
Okay.
I still need to type in the answer for the last few, but I don't see any other new questions coming in.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Again, I know we covered a lot of information in a very short amount of time. But please, if you think of questions after the fact, please send us an email, and we'll be glad to address those. If you do want to plan on an upgrade for 2018, please do that as well. And we have a few people that signed off on upgrades late last year for 2017. So if you're wanting to make that to version 2018 now, please get in touch with me. There will be some changes to the scope if you have the job cost or the payroll module, but we will address that. If you do not have those modules, then there's very little change related to the actual scope of work, but we do want to make, I can create a new scope of work document, or we can kind of talk out the details. Again, additional information will be forthcoming regarding the changes in the payroll module. We are working on putting something together that is more in-depth on the job cost module. I believe someone asked about that earlier. And if no other questions came in since I've been talking, Jody, we'll go ahead and end the session. And again, I do thank everyone for joining us today. A recording of this will be on our website probably by Friday. So you can feel free to share it with any coworkers, or if you want to review it again, please feel free to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Pam. There aren't any other questions, so we are wrapping up almost on the dot. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.